The first raindrop hit the back of Penelope Vance's hand before the sky opened like a broken faucet, and by the time she scrambled to gather her purchases, the flower market was already dissolving into chaos around her. Vendors yanked tarps over buckets of peonies and roses, their shouts mixing with the drum of water on canvas and pavement. Penelope clutched her paper-wrapped tulips against her chest and darted under the nearest awning, watching the street transform into a river in seconds. Her shoes were soaked through, her jacket clung to her shoulders. The storm had come out of nowhere, the way spring storms always did in this city, sudden and merciless. She dug through her bag, fingers finding the familiar curve of her umbrella. At least she'd remembered it this time. Most of the crowd had scattered by now, racing for cars or the metro entrance 2 blocks down. The flower stalls stood empty, their owners retreating to back rooms to wait it out. Penelope unfurled her umbrella and stepped to the edge of the awning, considering the sprint home. That was when she saw him. He stood in the middle of the sidewalk, perhaps 10 feet away, as motionless as the iron lampposts lining the street. Rain poured over him in sheets, plastering what looked like expensive clothes to his frame, and he didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't raise a hand to shield his face. Penelope stared. He was tall, lean in a way that suggested strength rather than fragility. His hair, pale as winter wheat, hung in wet strands against his face and neck. Even from this distance, even through the rain-silver curtain, she could see how striking he was. Beautiful in an unsettling way. Old-fashioned somehow, like a painting stepped out of its frame. But it was his stillness that made her step forward. People didn't stand like that. They shifted weight, adjusted collars, wiped water from their eyes. This man stood as though he'd been carved from marble, as though the storm didn't exist at all. Penelope glanced back at the empty market, then at the stranger. Her mother always said she had too much heart for her own good, that she'd invite a wolf inside if it looked cold enough. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was stupid. But watching someone drown on dry land while she stayed comfortable under her umbrella felt worse than stupid. She stepped into the rain. The water hit her umbrella like fists, but she held it steady and crossed the distance between them. Up close, he was even stranger. His skin was pale, almost luminous in the gray light. His eyes, when they finally shifted to her face, were such a light gray they were nearly silver. "Excuse me," Penelope said, raising her voice over the storm. "Would you like to share?" He looked at her. Really looked, as though cataloging every detail of her face, her posture, the way she held the umbrella angled to cover both of them. The rain continued to pour over his right shoulder, but at least his head was dry now. "Share," he repeated. His voice was deep, quiet despite the noise around them. Not a question. Just the word tasted like something foreign. "The umbrella," Penelope clarified, though that seemed obvious. "You'll catch your death out here." Something flickered across his expression. Amusement, maybe, or irony, she didn't understand. But he didn't move away. "I won't," he said. Penelope waited, but he didn't elaborate. The rain hammered down. Water pooled around their feet, and she watched a loose tulip petal float past her ankle. "Well, I'm already here," she said finally, "so you might as well let me feel useful." That got something closer to a reaction. His head tilted, just slightly, and his gaze lingered on her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. He seemed puzzled by her, the way someone might puzzle over a book written in a language they'd forgotten they knew. "You're getting wet," he observed. "So were you. It doesn't bother me." "It bothers me that it doesn't bother you," Penelope said, and surprised herself by meaning it. There was something deeply wrong about watching another person stand in a downpour like it was nothing. Something lonely about it. He went quiet again, studied her with those strange silver eyes. Then carefully, as though the gesture required consideration, he stepped closer. Fully under her umbrella now, near enough that she could see the water dripping from his jaw, the fine bones of his face, the uncanny stillness of his chest. He wasn't breathing. Penelope blinked. No, that couldn't be right. Everyone breathed. She must have missed it, distracted by the rain or the noise or her own pulse suddenly loud in her ears. "What's your name?" she asked, because standing in silence felt too heavy. He hesitated. "Quillon." "Quillon," she repeated, testing it, old-fashioned like the rest of him. "I'm Penelope." "Penelope." He said it the way he'd said share, as though learning the shape of it, then quieter. "You should go. The storm will get worse. What about you?" I'll remain. In the rain? It doesn't matter. Penelope frowned at him, this beautiful, waterlogged, inexplicable man who spoke like he'd wandered out of another century. You keep saying that, but you're standing under my umbrella now, so some part of you must disagree. Quillon's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something softer than the blank stillness he'd worn before. Perhaps? They stood together in the small, dry circle beneath her umbrella, and Penelope realized she was staring. It was rude. She knew it was rude, but he was the most compelling thing she'd seen in months, maybe years, and she couldn't quite make herself look away. Do you live nearby? She tried. Not far. Do you want me to walk with you? This time, his hesitation was longer. She watched something complicated move through his eyes, something that looked almost like fear, though that seemed impossible for someone who stood in storms like they were nothing. No, he said finally. The rejection stung more than it should have. Penelope nodded, stepping back slightly. Okay, well, stay dry, I guess. She started to turn, already planning the run home, but his hand moved, not to touch her, just raised slightly as though reaching for something he wasn't allowed to take. Wait. Penelope paused. Quillon lowered his hand. There's a puddle, he said. Behind you. Deep. She glanced back and saw he was right. A small lake had formed where the gutter was blocked, murky water spreading across the sidewalk. She would have stepped directly into it. Oh, thanks. He inclined his head, a gesture too formal for a flower market in the rain, and then he did something that made her breath catch. He moved past her, stepping deliberately into the puddle himself, and offered his hand to help her around it. Penelope took it before she could think better of it. His skin was cool, not cold exactly, but several degrees below what should have been normal. His fingers closed around hers with careful precision, and he guided her past the water to dry pavement on the other side. There, he said, releasing her immediately. Penelope looked down at her hand, then up at him. He'd retreated half a step, as though proximity required recovery time. You're very strange, she said. Yes, I like strange. Quillon went still again, but this time it felt different, charged, like she'd said something dangerous without meaning to. The rain began to ease, not stopping, but softening into something almost manageable. Quillon looked up at the sky, then back at her. You should go home, he said, before it starts again. This time, Penelope didn't argue, but she also didn't leave immediately. Will you be here next week? She asked. The market runs every Saturday. Why? Because I'd like to see you again. She watched shock register on his face, clear as daylight, as though the idea of someone seeking him out was so foreign it bordered on impossible. You don't know me, he said. Not yet. I'm not. He stopped, started again. I'm not someone you should know. Penelope adjusted her grip on both umbrella and flowers, considering him. The pale hair, the too still posture, the careful, old-fashioned way he spoke, the coolness of his hand, the missing breath. Let me guess, she said. You're going to tell me you're dangerous. Quillon's jaw tightened. Yes. Are you going to hurt me? No. Then I'll be here next Saturday, Penelope said. Same time. If you want to share my umbrella again, you're welcome to. She didn't wait for his response. The rain had thinned enough to risk the walk home, and if she stayed any longer, she'd do something truly stupid like ask for his number or touch his hand again just to feel that impossible coolness. But she felt his gaze on her back all the way to the corner, and when she finally glanced over her shoulder, he was still standing exactly where she'd left him, watching her disappear into the city with an expression that looked almost like wonder. Penelope smiled to herself and turned toward home, already counting the days until Saturday. She didn't really expect him to show up. Not after that cryptic conversation, not after the way he had looked at her like she was something miraculous and terrifying all at once. Men who talked like that, who radiated that kind of warning, usually meant it when they said stay away. But Penelope came back to the flower market the following Saturday anyway, umbrella in hand, even though the forecast promised sunshine. The morning was bright and clear, almost mockingly cheerful. She browsed the stalls slowly, picking through daffodils and examining a bucket of sweet peas, and tried not to feel disappointed. It was stupid to expect him. She'd shared an umbrella with a stranger for 5 minutes. That was all. Still, she stayed later than usual until the vendors started packing up their unsold stock and the crowd thinned to almost nothing. Looking for something specific, dear? Penelope turned to find Mrs. Chen, who ran the rose stall, watching her with knowing eyes. No, just browsing. You've been browsing the same corner for 40 minutes. Mrs. Chen's smile was kind. If you're waiting for someone, the coffee shop across the street has a better view. Penelope felt heat crawl up her neck. That obvious? Only to someone who's been working this market for 30 years. Mrs. Chen began wrapping a bundle of white roses in brown paper. Here, on the house. Whoever you're waiting for will appreciate them. Oh, I couldn't. You can and you will. Go on. Penelope accepted the roses, their stems cool and damp against her palm, and crossed to the coffee shop. She ordered something sweet and overly complicated, found a table by the window, and settled in to feel foolish. The sun climbed higher. The market closed. Vendors loaded vans and drove away, and Penelope sat with her cooling coffee and Mrs. Chen's roses, wondering what exactly she'd expected to happen. Then the light changed. That was the only way she could describe it later. The quality of sunshine coming through the window shifted, dimmed, as though something had moved between her and the source. Penelope looked up. Quillon stood on the sidewalk outside. He was dressed differently today. Dark trousers, a coat that looked tailored and expensive, all of it in shades of black and gray that made his pale hair almost glow. He was staring at the now empty space where the flower market had been, expression unreadable. Penelope grabbed the roses and her bag and was out the door before she could overthink it. Quillon! He turned, and the look on his face when he saw her made her heart stumble. Relief and distress in equal measure, like she was both the answer and the problem. Penelope, you came. I shouldn't have, but you did. She smiled, hoping it didn't look as nervous as she felt. I'm glad. Quillon glanced at the empty market space, then back to her. I'm late. The market closes at noon on sunny days, earlier when it's nice out. Penelope held up the roses. But I waited anyway, just in case. Something complicated crossed his face. He stepped closer, and Penelope noticed the way he moved now that she wasn't distracted by rain and urgency. Smooth, precise, too graceful to be entirely human. Like he was consciously imitating the small imperfections that made movement natural. You brought flowers, he said. Someone gave them to me. I think she could tell I was waiting for someone. Penelope offered them to him. Do you like roses? Quillon stared at the bundle in her hands as though she'd offered him something far more significant. I haven't received flowers in centuries. The word slipped out so casually that Penelope almost missed it. Centuries. Not years or decades. Centuries. Well, she said, keeping her voice light, now you have. He took them carefully, his cool fingers brushing hers in the exchange. He held the roses like they might shatter, and Penelope watched him bend his head to breathe in their scent. Except he didn't breathe. He mimed it, she realized. Lifted them to his face in the gesture of smelling flowers, but his chest didn't move and no air passed his lips. It was performance, habit, the ghost of human behavior worn like an old coat. You really aren't human, Penelope said quietly. Quillon went still. He lowered the roses, and when he met her eyes, his expression was guarded in a way it hadn't been the week before. No. Vampire? His jaw tightened. How did you... The stillness, the pale skin and hair, the way you don't breathe, the fact that you said centuries like it was normal? Penelope shrugged, aiming for casual even though her pulse was racing. Also, context clues. We're standing in a city that has vampire districts and blood banks that take special donations. It's not exactly a secret that you exist. This was true, though Penelope had never actually met a vampire before last week. The city had opened its doors to the immortal population about 50 years ago, carving out neighborhoods where they could live openly, establishing laws and treaties that protected both sides. It was still strange, still controversial in some circles, but mostly it worked. Though vampires who looked like Quillon, who carried themselves with that kind of ancient gravity, usually didn't spend their Saturdays standing in the rain at flower markets. If you know what I am, Quillon said slowly, why did you wait for me? Because you seemed lonely and sad, and like you could use someone offering to share an umbrella even if it wasn't raining. He stared at her. The roses hung forgotten in his hand, and for a long moment Penelope wondered if she'd miscalculated, if he'd turn and walk away and she'd never see him again. Instead, he said, would you like to walk with me? Relief flooded her chest. Yes, absolutely yes. They fell into step together, Quillon still carrying the white roses, Penelope adjusting her pace to match his. He led them away from the market, down side streets she'd never explored, through neighborhoods that grew quieter and older as they walked. "Can I ask how old you are?" Penelope ventured. "Or is that rude?" "It's not rude." Quillon's gaze stayed forward. "I'm 743. "Wow." "Yes. And you've been in this city the whole time?" "No. I came here 60 years ago when the treaties were signed. Before that, I moved frequently." Penelope tried to imagine 7 centuries of existence, of watching the world change and change again, everyone you knew turning to dust. It felt too big to hold in her head. "Do you like it here?" she asked. "I did. For a while." Quillon paused at a crosswalk, though there were no cars coming, old habit, maybe, or politeness. "It's become complicated recently." "How so?" "Politics." He said it like a curse. "Expectations. The weight of what I am." "Which is?" Quillon turned his head, meeting her eyes fully for the first time since they had started walking. "A king." Penelope stopped, actually stopped walking, 1 foot halfway off the curb. "You're joking." "I am not." "You're a vampire king." "Yes." "And you were just standing in the rain last week at a flower market." "Yes." Penelope laughed before she could stop herself. It came out slightly hysterical, edged with disbelief. "I offered to share my umbrella with the king." "You offered to share your umbrella with a stranger who was wet," Quillon corrected. "My title had nothing to do with it." "Is that why you came back?" "Because I didn't know who you were." He considered this. "Partly. You treated me like a person, not a position. That's rare." They started walking again. Penelope's mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the quiet, careful man beside her with the idea of vampire royalty. She didn't know much about vampire politics, but she knew enough. Kings commanded courts, territories, power that stretched back centuries. They didn't stand alone in rainstorms looking lost. "What's it like?" she asked. "Being a king?" "Lonely," Quillon said simply. "Especially now." "Why now?" He was quiet for so long that Penelope thought he might not answer. They turned another corner, entering a street lined with old brownstones and iron gates. Expensive neighborhood. The kind where vampires and old money humans live side by side in careful tolerance. "Because I've been alone for 700 years, Quillon said finally. "And I forgot until last week what it felt like to have someone simply stand beside me, without agenda, without fear, just to offer shelter from a storm." His words hit her chest like a physical thing. Penelope slowed, and Quillon stopped with her. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," she said. "It's the truth." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Quillon's expression softened, not quite a smile, but close. The closest she'd seen from him. "No, they're not." Penelope looked at him, this ancient king carrying roses in the afternoon sun, and made a decision that was probably reckless and definitely too fast, but felt right anyway. "Would you like to get dinner with me?" she asked. "Or, well, I'll get dinner. You can get whatever vampires get. Coffee, wine? Do you drink wine?" "I can drink wine," Quillon said. "I won't enjoy it, but I can." "That's a terrible answer. What do you enjoy?" "Conversation, apparently, with you." Penelope felt warmth spread through her chest. "So that's a yes to dinner." Quillon looked at her for a long moment, and she watched something like fear flicker through his eyes again, but he nodded. "Yes, I would like that very much." They had dinner at a small restaurant tucked into a basement, the kind of place that catered to mixed company, human food on one side of the menu, specialized drinks on the other. Penelope ordered pasta and wine, and Quillon ordered something dark in a crystal glass that she suspected wasn't wine at all, and they sat across from each other in a corner booth while evening fell outside. "Tell me about the flower market," Quillon said. "Why do you go?" Penelope twirled pasta on her fork. "I like flowers, and I like the market. It feels real, you know? Everyone there is just trying to sell their stock and go home. No pretense, no performance, just people and flowers and weather." "You work in performance?" "God, no. I'm a children's librarian. But the rest of life feels like performance sometimes. Smiling at patrons even when they're rude. Pretending I'm not exhausted. Acting like I have everything figured out." She took a sip of wine. "The flower market is the one place I go where I can just be." Quillon listened with absolute focus, the kind of attention that made her feel like every word mattered. It was intoxicating and slightly terrifying. "That's why you spoke to me," he said. Because I look like I needed somewhere to just be. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just nosy and couldn't stand watching someone drown on dry land. Either way, I'm grateful. They talked through the meal. Penelope told him about her job, her tiny apartment with its overflowing bookshelves, the fact that she'd moved to the city 3 years ago and still felt like a tourist half the time. Quillon told her about centuries and fragments, careful pieces that never quite formed a whole picture. He'd seen empires rise and fall, watched the world transform from torches to electricity. He spoke about history the way Penelope spoke about last week, casual and immediate, and it made her head spin. "Do you have family?" she asked. "Other vampires you're close to?" Quillon's expression shuddered. "I have a court, advisors, people who serve the crown." "That's not what I asked." "I know." He turned his glass on the table, watching the dark liquid inside catch the light. "The answer is no. I have no one I would call family. Not anymore." "What happened to them?" "Time, politics, the usual reasons people drift apart when they have centuries to do it." Penelope reached across the table and touched his hand. Just her fingers on his knuckles, brief and light. "I'm sorry." Quillon stared at the point of contact like it was a miracle. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Touching me, speaking to me like I'm ordinary, offering kindness as though it costs you nothing." "It doesn't cost me anything." "It does," Quillon said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." Something in his voice made Penelope pull her hand back. "Are you in danger? Is that what you meant about politics being complicated?" "Not danger, exactly. More like scrutiny." Quillon finally met her eyes. "My court has been restless. They see my age as weakness, my solitude as instability. There are factions who believe a king who keeps himself separate cannot rule effectively." "That's ridiculous." "Perhaps. But perception shapes reality in vampire politics. They watch for cracks, reason to challenge, and I've given them 7 centuries of distance to interpret as vulnerability." Penelope leaned back, processing this. "So what happens if they decide you're too vulnerable? They move against me, attempt to remove me from power, install someone they consider stronger. Would they win?" Quillon's smile was sharp and cold, the first truly dangerous expression she'd seen from him. "No." "Then why do you care what they think?" "Because I'm tired, Penelope. I've spent 700 years maintaining control, projecting strength, keeping everyone at arm's length to protect the stability of my position. And it works. I've held power longer than most kings survive, but the cost is that I forgot how to be anything other than cold." He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it took Penelope a moment to understand what he was really telling her. He wasn't just lonely, he was empty, hollowed out by centuries of self-imposed isolation. "Last week," Quillon continued, "when you offered me your umbrella, I didn't even realize I was standing in the rain. Not until you pointed it out. I don't feel temperature anymore, don't notice discomfort. I've been so guarded for so long that I stopped registering the world around me." "That's heartbreaking." "It's practical." "It's both," Penelope said firmly, "and I think you know that, or you wouldn't have come back today." Quillon went quiet. He lifted his glass, took a drink he couldn't taste, and set it down with careful precision. "I came back because you made me feel something," he admitted. "For the first time in longer than I can remember, someone looked at me and saw a person worth sheltering. Not a king, not a threat, just someone who might need kindness, and I couldn't stop thinking about it." Penelope's chest ached. "I'm glad you came back." "You shouldn't be. Being close to me will complicate your life." "Maybe I like complicated." "You don't understand? Then explain it to me," Penelope interrupted, "without the cryptic warnings and the noble self-sacrifice routine. Just tell me plainly what you're worried about." Quillon looked at her, and she saw something break behind his eyes, some careful control slipping. "I'm worried that if my court sees you, they'll realize you matter to me, and they'll use that. They'll see closeness as weakness and you as leverage. I'm worried that I've been alone so long, I don't remember how to be close to someone without destroying them. And I'm worried that I'll be selfish enough to keep seeing you anyway because the alternative is going back to 700 years of nothing, and I don't think I can bear that anymore." Silence settled over the table. Penelope's pulse was loud in her ears. "Those are valid concerns," she said finally. "I know, but here's the thing, Quillon. I'm not asking you to protect me from your life. I'm asking if you'd like to get coffee next week. Maybe go to the flower market again, see what happens." "That's how it starts?" "Yes, that's exactly how it starts." Penelope smiled. And maybe it ends badly. Maybe your court gets involved and everything becomes complicated and messy. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just good. Maybe you get to have something good after 700 years of nothing, and that's worth the risk. Quillon stared at her. You're either very brave or very foolish. Definitely foolish, but I like you, and I think you like me. So let's be foolish together and see where it goes. He was quiet for so long that Penelope thought she'd pushed too hard, but then he nodded, small and careful. Coffee next week, he said. I would like that. Penelope grinned. Good. It's a date. They walked together after dinner, and Quillon insisted on seeing her home. He moved beside her like a shadow, always positioning himself between Penelope and the street, redirecting their path around hazards she wouldn't have noticed. The protective instinct was so natural it seemed unconscious, and Penelope found it both touching and slightly amusing. You know, I've been walking myself home for years, right? She said as he steered her around a cracked section of sidewalk. Yes. And I've survived just fine. I know. So the bodyguard routine is a little excessive. Quillon glanced at her. I can't help it. It's instinct. Vampire instinct? King instinct. When I care about something, I protect it. The casual admission made Penelope's steps falter. You care about me? We've known each other 2 weeks. I'm 743 years old, Penelope. I know what matters much faster than I used to. They reached her building, a converted brownstone divided into apartments. Penelope stopped at the front steps and turned to face him. This is me. Quillon looked up at the building, then back to her. It's nice. It's small and the heating is inconsistent, but it's home. Penelope hesitated, then made herself ask, Would you like to come up? I make terrible coffee, but I have tea. She watched him consider it. Watch, desire, and caution wore across his face. Not tonight, he said finally. But ask me again. Next week? Yes. Penelope nodded, trying not to feel disappointed. Okay, next week. She started up the steps, but Quillon's voice stopped her. Penelope. She turned. He was holding the white roses still, slightly wilted now, but still beautiful. Thank you. For this? For all of it. You don't have to thank me for being decent. Yes, Quillon said quietly. I do. He left before she could respond, disappearing down the street with that too smooth grace, and Penelope watched until he turned the corner. Then she climbed to her apartment, let herself inside, and collapsed on her couch with a breathless laugh. She was dating a vampire king. This was either the best or worst decision she'd ever made, and she couldn't wait to find out which. The coffee date turned into a walk through the park. The walk turned into lunch at a cafe that served both human and vampire clientele. Lunch turned into an evening at a bookstore where Quillon followed Penelope through the stacks and listened to her talk about children's literature with an intensity that made the air feel electric. They fell into a rhythm over the next few weeks. Saturdays at the flower market where Penelope would buy whatever looked prettiest and Quillon would carry her purchases while they wandered. Weekday evenings when their schedules aligned, meeting for dinner or walks or quiet hours in her apartment, where Quillon would sit in her armchair and read while she graded book reports or planned library programs. It was easy. Comfortable in a way Penelope hadn't expected with someone so otherworldly. But there were complications too. Quillon never invited her to his home, never spoke about his court in detail. He deflected questions about his life outside their time together with practiced ease, and Penelope let him because pushing felt like it might shatter whatever fragile thing they were building. She noticed other things too. The way he tensed whenever his phone rang. The careful way he checked their surroundings before relaxing in public. The night she woke on her couch to find him standing at her window, staring out at the street below with an expression that looked like dread. Quillon? He turned, and the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. Penelope sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. What's wrong? Nothing. Go back to sleep. That's not an answer. Quillon crossed to her, crouching so they were at eye level. I'm being careful. That's all. Careful of what? Making sure no one followed me here, that you're safe. Penelope's chest tightened. Has someone been following you? Not yet, but they will be soon. My court has noticed my absences. They're starting to ask questions. What kind of questions? Where I go, why I smile more often, whether I've finally found something that could be used against me. Quillon's jaw tightened. They're looking for weakness, and I've been too happy to hide it properly. Penelope reached out, cupping his face in both hands. His skin was cool as always, smooth as marble. I'm not your weakness. You are, and you're also my strength. That's what they won't understand. Then make them understand. It's not that simple. Why not? Quillon closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Because vampire politics are built on fear and distance. A king who allows himself closeness, who admits to caring about something beyond power, becomes a target. They'll see you as leverage, a way to control me. Can they control you? Not in the way they think, but they can hurt you, and that would destroy me. Penelope's heart was racing. So what do we do? I don't know. Quillon opened his eyes, and the vulnerability there stole her breath. For 700 years, I've known exactly what to do, how to move, what to say, where to apply pressure to maintain control, but this is new territory. I don't know how to protect both you and what we have. Maybe you don't have to choose, Penelope said. Maybe there's a way to do both. If there is, I haven't found it yet. They stayed like that for a long moment, Penelope's hands on his face, Quillon kneeling before her in the dim apartment. Then he stood, pulling her with him. Come to bed, Penelope said. Properly, I mean. Stop keeping watch like something's going to break down my door. Something might. Then we'll deal with it together, but right now, I'm tired and you're exhausted in whatever way vampires get exhausted, and we should sleep. Quillon let her lead him to the bedroom. Let her pull him down onto the mattress beside her, still fully clothed, and tuck herself against his side. He held her carefully, like she might evaporate, and Penelope felt his stillness gradually soften into something almost like rest. I've never done this before, he admitted to the darkness. Slept with someone? Slept beside someone, not in centuries, not like this. Penelope pressed her face against his shoulder. How does it feel? Terrifying, perfect. Like I've been cold for 700 years and forgot what warmth felt like. She smiled against his shirt. Good. Now close your eyes and pretend to sleep like a normal person. I don't sleep. Then pretend extra hard. She felt his chest move in something that might have been a laugh, silent and unused to the gesture. His hand came up to stroke her hair, and Penelope let herself drift off to the rhythm of his fingers, feeling safer than she had in years. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Penelope was closing the library, humming while she shelved the last of the returns when the front doors opened despite the clearly posted hours. We're closed, she called, not looking up. Come back tomorrow at 9. We're not here for books. The voice was male, cold, and wrong in a way that made Penelope's instincts scream. She turned slowly. 3 figures stood in the entrance, 2 men and a woman, all with that same pale skin and hair as Quillon, all moving with that too smooth grace. Vampires. Old ones, if their bearing was any indication. The library is closed, Penelope repeated, fighting to keep her voice steady. If you need something, you can come back during business hours. You misunderstand, the woman said. She was beautiful in a sharp, cruel way, like a knife polished to mirror brightness. We're here for you, Miss Vance. Penelope's blood went cold. How do you know my name? We know many things about you, where you work, where you live, how you take your coffee, the fact that you've been occupying our king's attention for the past 2 months. The king. They meant Quillon. I don't know what you're talking about, Penelope said. Don't insult us with lies. One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, wearing an expensive suit, and his smile was all teeth. Quillon Caney has been disappearing twice a week like clockwork. We followed him 3 nights ago, watched him enter your apartment and stay until dawn. Panic spiked through Penelope's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. If you have a problem with where Quillon spends his time, take it up with him. We are, the woman said, through you. I'm not anyone's messenger. No, you're leverage. She moved closer, and Penelope fought the urge to run. Our king has been alone for 7 centuries, untouchable, unshakable, and then you offered him an umbrella and suddenly he's smiling, distracted, weak. He's not weak. He's compromised. There's a difference. The woman tilted her head. Do you know what happens to compromised kings, Miss Vance? They get threatened by people who mistake isolation for strength. The woman's smile sharpened. They get replaced. Penelope's heart hammered. You're planning a coup. We're planning a restoration. Quillon has ruled well for centuries because he was cold. calculating, above mortal concerns, but you've made him soft, and soft kings don't survive vampire politics. So you came here to what? Threaten me? Kill me? Force Quillon back into isolation? We came here to make you understand the consequences of your relationship. The woman stopped an arm's length away. If you continue seeing him, you make him vulnerable. His enemies will use you against him. And we, his court, will be forced to remove you as a threat to his stability. By remove, you mean kill. If necessary. Rage burned through Penelope's fear. Let me get this straight. You claim to serve Quillon, to want what's best for him. And your solution is to murder the first person who's made him happy in 700 years? Happiness is irrelevant. Power is what matters. That's the saddest, most broken logic I've ever heard. The male vampire, who had been silent until now, laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. She has spirit. I'll give her that. Spirit won't save her, the woman said. Miss Vance, you have a choice. Walk away from Quillon willingly, and we'll ensure you remain safe and undisturbed. Continue this relationship, and we'll do what's necessary to protect our king from himself. Penelope's mind raced. She was alone in a locked library with 3 ancient vampires who could kill her before she reached the door. No one knew she was in danger. Quillon was probably at his court, dealing with whatever political nightmare these 3 represented. But giving in felt like betraying everything they'd built together. No, Penelope said. The woman raised an eyebrow. No, I'm not walking away, and I'm not going to let you twist caring about someone into a weakness. Penelope straightened her spine. Quillon has been alone for 700 years because people like you convinced him that closeness was dangerous. That feeling anything made him vulnerable. You didn't protect him. You isolated him. And if you can't see the difference, then you're the ones who are broken, not him. Silence fell. The 3 vampires stared at her, and Penelope watched calculation move through their expressions. Bold words, the woman said finally. Let's see if you still believe them, when Quillon is forced to choose between you and his throne. They left as suddenly as they'd appeared, the door swinging shut behind them. Penelope stood alone in the empty library, shaking, and tried to figure out what to do next. She called Quillon the moment she got home, but it went to voicemail. She left a message. Your court came to see me. We need to talk. Call me back, and then paced her apartment, trying to decide if she should be more worried or angry. Quillon appeared at her door 20 minutes later, moving faster than she'd ever seen him move, his expression somewhere between fury and terror. Are you hurt? He demanded the moment she opened the door. No, I'm fine. They just talked. Quillon swept into her apartment, checking the windows, the locks, moving through the space like he expected to find intruders hiding in closets. Penelope watched him, heart aching at the barely controlled panic rolling off him in waves. Quillon, I'm okay. He turned on her, and his eyes were wilder than she'd ever seen them. Who came? How many? What did they say? Penelope told him. Laid out the whole encounter in careful detail while Quillon's expression went from furious to murderous. By the time she finished, he looked ready to tear something apart. I'll kill them, he said quietly. All 3. Tonight. That seems extreme. They threatened you, came to your workplace, made it clear they consider you expendable. Quillon's hands were clenched into fists. That deserves death. Or it deserves consequences that don't involve you becoming the monster they think you are. I am a monster, Penelope. I've killed for less. You're not. And even if you were, I wouldn't want you to become worse to protect me. Quillon moved to her, gripping her shoulders. You don't understand. They will hurt you. If not tonight, then soon. They see you as a weakness to exploit, and they're right. They're not right. They're afraid. Of what? Of losing control. Of you changing. Of the fact that a king who cares about something beyond power is harder to predict and manipulate. Penelope covered his hands with hers. They want you isolated because isolated kings are easier to manage, but you're not easier now. You're stronger, and that terrifies them. Quillon stared at her. How are you not afraid? I am afraid. I'm terrified, but I'm also angry because they're trying to take away the best thing that's happened to me in years, and I won't let them. Something broke in Quillon's expression. He pulled her against him, holding her with a desperation that made her ribs ache. I can't lose you. You won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you, but we can fight for it, together. Quillon pulled back enough to look at her face. If we do this, If we stay together and make it public, everything will escalate. They'll move against me directly. Try to remove me from power. Can they? No. But they'll try anyway, and it will be bloody. Then we'll handle it. You're the king, Quillon. Act like it. He stared at her, and slowly something shifted behind his eyes. The panic bled away, replaced by the cold calculation she'd seen glimpses of before. The king emerging from beneath the careful, gentle person he'd been with her. You're right, he said quietly. I've been trying to hide you, protect you by keeping you separate, but that makes you vulnerable, a secret to exploit. So what's the alternative? I bring you into the light, make it clear you're under my protection. That harming you means challenging me directly. Won't that make things worse? In the short term, yes, but it also changes the game. Right now, they see you as a weakness, something I'll sacrifice to maintain power. If I make it clear I won't, that you're not a liability but a choice I'm making with full knowledge of the consequences, they'll have to reassess. Penelope considered this. You'd be gambling your throne on us. I'd be demonstrating that a king who chooses closeness isn't weak. He's confident enough to protect what matters. Quillon cupped her face in both hands. But it will be dangerous. For both of us. You need to understand that. I understand. And you still want this? Penelope smiled. I still want this. All of it. The danger and the politics and the 700-year-old vampire king who stood in the rain because he forgot what cold felt like. Quillon kissed her. It was the first time, and it was gentle and fierce all at once, his cool lips against hers with a hunger that felt like centuries of starvation finally fed. Penelope kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. I need to go, Quillon said. Handle my court before they escalate further. Be careful. Always. But Penelope... He hesitated. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days. I'll send someone to bring you to me tomorrow evening. Where are we going? My court. It's time you met them properly. As my partner, not my secret. Penelope's stomach flipped. That's terrifying. I know, but I'll be there, and I won't let anything happen to you. Promise? On my life, on my throne, on everything I am. Quillon kissed her forehead. You made me remember what it feels like to be close to someone. I won't lose that. I won't lose you. He left, and Penelope stood in her empty apartment, heart racing, trying to process the fact that her life had just become exponentially more complicated. But when she thought about Quillon's kiss, about the way he'd held her like she was precious beyond measure, it felt worth it. She packed her bag and waited for whatever came next. The car that arrived the following evening was sleek, black, and obviously expensive. The driver was a vampire named Dorian, who treated Penelope with careful courtesy and drove in complete silence through streets that grew progressively older and wealthier as they went. They stopped in front of what looked like a mansion. Old stone, iron gates, the kind of place that screamed old money and older secrets. Penelope clutched her overnight bag and followed Dorian through the entrance. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. High ceilings, antique furniture, art that probably belonged in museums. Everything elegant and cold and beautiful in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. Quillon met her in the entrance hall. He was dressed differently than she'd ever seen him, in formal clothing that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent, his hair pulled back, expression carefully neutral. This was the king, she realized. The public version he wore like armor. Penelope... He took her hand, and the coolness of his touch was familiar enough to settle her nerves. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Always. But I'm grateful you chose this. He led her deeper into the mansion, through hallways lined with portraits of pale, regal figures who must have been vampire nobility. They passed other vampires, all of whom stopped to stare at Penelope with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. Your court seems thrilled, Penelope muttered. They'll adjust, or they won't. Either way, you're here, and that's what matters. They reached a set of double doors. Quillon paused, turning to face her. Behind these doors is my throne room. My entire court is assembled. They know you're coming, and they're going to test you. Test us. What kind of test? Questions. Challenges to your presence here, attempts to make you feel unwelcome or afraid. They want to see if you'll break. If I'll waver. Penelope straightened her spine. I won't break. I know. That's why I brought you. Quillon squeezed her hand. Stay close to me, don't answer direct challenges, let me handle the politics, and remember that no matter what they say, you're here because I want you here, because you matter to me. That's all the justification required. Okay, ready? Penelope took a breath. No, but let's do it anyway. Quillon pushed open the doors. The throne room was massive. High ceilings supported by marble columns, a long stretch of polished floor leading to a raised dais where an ornate chair sat empty. And everywhere, vampires. Dozens of them, all pale and beautiful and ancient, all turning to watch as Quillon entered with Penelope at his side. The silence was deafening. Quillon led her down the center of the room, his grip on her hand firm and possessive. Every eye tracked their progress. Penelope felt her heart hammering, but she kept her chin up, refusing to show fear. They reached the dais. Quillon released her hand long enough to sit on the throne, and then he did something that made the entire room collectively inhale. He gestured to the space beside his throne, a smaller seat that Penelope hadn't noticed before. "Sit with me," Quillon said. It wasn't a request. It was an order given with absolute authority, and Penelope realized with a jolt what he was doing. The seat beside the throne was for a consort, for someone equal in importance, if not power. He was claiming her publicly. Penelope sat, and the room erupted. Voices rose in shock and outrage, vampires shouting over each other, demanding explanations. Quillon raised one hand, and the noise cut off instantly. "For 700 years," Quillon said, his voice carrying through the massive space, "I have ruled alone. I have kept distance between myself and others, believing that isolation protected both the throne and those around me. But I was wrong." He looked at Penelope, and his expression softened in a way that made her chest ache. "Isolation didn't protect me. It hollowed me out, made me cold and distant and half alive. And then Penelope offered me an umbrella in a rainstorm, and I remembered what it felt like to be seen as a person rather than a position." Quillon stood, addressing the court. "Some of you believe this makes me weak, that caring about someone beyond power is a vulnerability you can exploit. You're wrong. Penelope is not my weakness. She's the reason I remember what I'm protecting when I hold this throne. She's proof that strength and closeness are not opposites." The woman from the library stepped forward. She was dressed in formal gowns, her expression coldly furious. "You're risking everything for a human who can't possibly understand our world." "I'm risking nothing. I'm choosing something." Quillon's voice went hard. "And if you take issue with that choice, Seraphine, you're welcome to challenge me directly." Seraphine's jaw tightened. "You know I can't beat you in direct combat." "Then accept my choice and move on." "It's not that simple. The other territories won't accept a human consort." "They don't have to accept her. They have to accept my authority. If they can't, they are welcome to test it." Another voice rose from the crowd. "What happens when she ages? When she dies and you're left grieving and distracted? You're gambling the stability of our entire territory on a relationship with an expiration date." Penelope flinched, but Quillon's hand found hers, steady and sure. "What happens is that I will have lived," Quillon said quietly. "Truly lived, not just existed. And when the time comes, I'll face that grief knowing it was worth it, that she was worth it." The room went silent. Penelope watched vampires exchange glances, watched calculation and confusion move through the crowd. They didn't understand, she realized. The concept of choosing something temporary, something fragile, when immortality stretched endlessly forward was foreign to them. "You're all missing the point," Penelope said suddenly. Every head turned to her. Quillon squeezed her hand in warning, but Penelope pushed forward anyway. "You keep talking about weakness and vulnerability like they're the same thing. They're not. Quillon isn't weak because he cares about someone. He's powerful enough to risk caring. That's not the same thing." Seraphine's expression was withering. "Humans don't understand vampire politics." "Maybe not, but I understand people. And I understand that a king who's been alone for 700 years and survived this long without losing himself to cruelty or madness is stronger than any of you are giving him credit for." Pretty words. They won't protect him when his enemies smell blood. "No, I will." Penelope stood, moving to stand beside Quillon's throne. "You want to use me against him? Go ahead and try. But understand that I'm not some fragile thing that will shatter under pressure. I'm a person who chose to stand beside a vampire king knowing exactly what that meant, and I'm not going anywhere." The silence that followed was different, charged. Penelope saw respect flicker through some expressions, hostility in others, but no one spoke. Quillon stood beside her. Penelope is under my direct protection. Harming her is equivalent to attacking me. Anyone who takes issue with that can bring their challenge forward now. No one moved. Good. Then this audience is over. Return to your duties. The court dispersed slowly, vampires filing out in groups, their conversations hushed but animated. Seraphine was one of the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at them. This isn't over, Quillon. I know, but it's not the beginning either. I've faced worse threats than a court unsettled by change. She left, and finally the throne room was empty, except for Penelope and Quillon. Penelope let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was intense. You were magnificent. Quillon pulled her close, tucking her against his side. Brave and brilliant, and exactly what they needed to see. I think I made things worse. You made things clear. That's different. He kissed the top of her head. They'll push back, test boundaries, try to find ways to separate us. But you stood there and claimed your place beside me, and that matters. What happens now? Now we prove them wrong. Show them that a bonded king is stronger, not weaker. That closeness doesn't compromise authority. How do we do that? Quillon smiled. It was sharp and cold and absolutely confident. By being exactly what we are, together, openly, let them watch and realize their assumptions were false. Penelope leaned into him, letting his coolness settle her racing heart. I can do that. I know you can. You've already proven it. They stood together in the empty throne room, king and human, and Penelope felt the weight of what they had just done settle over them. It was terrifying and exhilarating in an equal measure. But when Quillon looked at her, his expression soft despite the cold throne room around them, it felt right. The following weeks were a careful dance of politics and presence. Quillon brought Penelope to court functions, made her visible at his side, and dealt with the resulting pushback with a combination of authority and brutal efficiency. Challenges came, both subtle and direct, and each time Quillon shut them down with the kind of cold precision that reminded everyone exactly why he'd held power for 7 centuries. Penelope adjusted to the strange new reality of her life. She still worked at the library, still bought flowers on Saturdays, but now she spent most nights in the mansion, learning the rhythms of vampire society. It was overwhelming and beautiful and occasionally terrifying, but Quillon was always there, solid and protective, and increasingly open in ways he hadn't been before. You're different, Penelope observed one evening. They were in his private chambers, a suite of rooms that managed to be both luxurious and comfortable. Quillon was reading, and Penelope was curled against his side, her own book forgotten in her lap. How so? More relaxed. You smile more often. Talk about things that aren't court business. Quillon set down his book. That's your influence. You make me remember that I'm more than my position. Do the others notice? Yes, it confuses them. They're not sure how to reconcile the king who destroys challenges without mercy and the person who brings you tea exactly how you like it. Penelope laughed. Those things aren't opposites. I know, but they don't. Not yet. Will they? Eventually. Or they'll continue to underestimate me, and I'll continue to prove them wrong. Quillon pulled her closer. Either way, I'm not changing back. I spent 700 years being cold because I thought I had to. I won't make that mistake again. Penelope kissed him, soft and lingering, and felt his contentment like a tangible thing. But the peace didn't last. 2 months after her first appearance at court, Seraphine made her move. It happened during a formal gathering. Vampires from multiple territories assembled to discuss treaties and trade agreements. Penelope was there as Quillon's acknowledged consort, standing beside his throne while he navigated negotiations with the smooth authority of centuries of practice. Seraphine waited until the main business was concluded, then stood. I have a formal challenge to present. The room went quiet. Quillon's expression didn't change, but Penelope felt him tense beside her. Speak, Quillon said. I challenge your fitness to rule. You've allowed personal attachment to compromise your judgment and weaken your authority. For the stability of our territory, I call for your removal. Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. Formal challenges were rare, deadly serious, and almost never successful against someone as old and powerful as Quillon. On what grounds? Quillon's voice was ice. You've elevated a human to a position of influence without consulting the court. You've demonstrated emotional vulnerability that our enemies can exploit. And you've prioritized personal happiness over political necessity. Seraphine's gaze flicked to Penelope. Your attachment to her has made you weak. Interesting theory. Would you like to test it? I would. By traditional combat, you and I to resolution. Winner holds the throne. Penelope's heart stopped. Combat meant death. One of them wouldn't walk away. Accepted, Quillon said calmly. Tonight, in the old hall, witnessed by the full court. Seraphine smiled. I look forward to proving my point. She left, and chaos erupted. Vampires clustered in groups, their conversations urgent. Penelope grabbed Quillon's arm. You can't fight her. This is what she wants? I know, and she'll get it, along with a demonstration of why challenging me is a fatal mistake. Quillon, she's ancient too. She's been on your court for centuries. She has to be powerful. She is. But I'm more powerful, and more importantly, I have something worth fighting for now. She thinks that makes me weaker. I'm going to prove how wrong she is. What if you lose? Quillon cupped her face in both hands. I won't, but if I did, Dorian has instructions to get you somewhere safe. You'll be protected regardless. I don't care about safe if you're dead. Then it's fortunate I have no intention of dying tonight. The old hall was underground, a massive stone chamber that looked like it had been carved centuries ago. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering shadows across ancient flagstones. The entire court assembled, forming a circle around the central space where Quillon and Seraphine faced each other. Penelope stood at the edge with Dorian, her heart in her throat. Quillon had removed his formal jacket, standing in shirt sleeves, and even across the distance she could see the cold focus in his eyes. This was the warrior king, she realized. The version of him that had survived 7 centuries of vampire politics through strength and ruthlessness. The challenge has been witnessed, an older vampire announced. He was clearly some kind of official, his voice carrying through the hall. Combat to resolution, begin! Seraphine moved first. She was fast, impossibly fast, crossing the space between her and Quillon in a blur. Penelope saw the flash of something sharp claws or a blade. She couldn't tell, and then Quillon was moving too, blocking and countering with precision that made the fight look choreographed. It wasn't. The speed and violence were real, both vampires moving with inhuman grace, trading blows that would have killed a human instantly. Quillon fought with cold efficiency, no wasted movement, each strike calculated. Seraphine was more aggressive, pressing forward with combinations meant to overwhelm. They were evenly matched in speed, but Penelope could see the difference in power. Every time Quillon connected, Seraphine was forced back. Every time she hit him, he barely moved. The fight went on. Minutes that felt like hours. Penelope couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. Blood appeared dark, vampire blood that looked black in the torchlight, but she couldn't tell whose. Then Seraphine made a mistake. She overextended on a strike, and Quillon caught her wrist. There was a sickening crack, and Seraphine screamed. Quillon used her momentum against her, throwing her to the ground with enough force to crack the flagstones. He stood over her, completely calm despite the blood on his shirt and the way his chest heaved with unnecessary breaths. Yield, Quillon said. Never. Then die. Seraphine tried to rise, but Quillon moved faster. There was a flash of movement too quick to follow, and then it was over. Seraphine collapsed, truly lifeless this time, and the hall went deathly silent. Quillon straightened, turned to face the assembled court, blood-spattered and utterly composed. Does anyone else wish to challenge my fitness to rule? No one spoke. No one moved. Then hear this clearly. I am your king because I am strong enough to hold this position, not despite my bond with Penelope, but including it. She doesn't make me weak. She makes me remember what I'm protecting, why this throne matters beyond power for its own sake. He walked toward Penelope, ignoring the blood and the shocked court. When he reached her, he took her hand, his touch still cool despite the violence. This is my choice, my bond, my strength. Anyone who sees it as weakness is welcome to test that assumption the way Seraphine did, but understand that the result will be the same. Quillon turned back to the court. Now clean this up and return to your duties. We're done here. He led Penelope from the hall, Dorian following at a respectful distance. No one tried to stop them. The court simply watched, shock and new understanding written across their faces. Outside, in the corridor beyond the old hall, Penelope finally let herself react. She grabbed Quillon's arm, checking him for injuries. "Are you okay? You're bleeding." "I'm fine. Superficial wounds. They'll heal." That was the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. "I'm sorry you had to see it." "Don't be. I needed to understand what you are. All of what you are." Penelope looked up at him, this ancient king covered in blood who just killed to protect their bond. "You're terrifying and gentle in equal measure. Does that frighten you?" "A little, but mostly it just makes me love you more." Quillon went still. "You love me?" Penelope laughed shakily. "Of course I love you. I've loved you since you stood in the rain like it didn't matter. Since you carried my flowers and read in my armchair and admitted you'd forgotten what warmth felt like." "I've loved you since you offered me your umbrella," Quillon said quietly. "I didn't know it then. Didn't have words for what I was feeling. But I do now. I love you, Penelope, completely, impossibly, in ways I didn't think I could anymore." He kissed her there in the corridor, still covered in blood, and Penelope kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "Take me home," Penelope whispered. "Not the court, not the mansion, my apartment. I want to be somewhere normal with you." "Anything you want." They went to her apartment, small and cluttered and gloriously ordinary. Quillon showered while Penelope made tea, and when he emerged, clean and dressed in borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit, he looked more like the person she'd met in the rain than the king who'd just killed a challenger. "Better?" she asked. "Much." They curled up on her couch together, tea cooling on the side table, and just breathed. "What happens now?" Penelope asked. "With the court? They'll adjust. Tonight made it clear that challenging me is futile, that I'm not compromised by our bond. If anything, I'm more formidable because I have something worth protecting." "You really think they'll accept that?" "Some will, others won't, but they'll all respect it. That's what matters in vampire politics." "It sounds exhausting." "It is. But it's also been my life for 7 centuries. I'm used to it." Quillon pulled her closer. "What I'm not used to is this. Having someone to come home to. Someone who sees me as more than a king. That's new and it's terrifying, and I never want to lose it." Penelope pressed her face against his shoulder. "You won't. We've already proven we can survive the worst your court can throw at us. There will be more challenges, different kinds. Politics doesn't end with one fight. I know, but we'll handle it together." "Together," Quillon repeated. "I like the sound of that." They stayed like that for hours, wrapped around each other in Penelope's tiny apartment, and the rest of the world felt very far away. 6 months later, Penelope moved into the mansion officially. Not into Quillon's chambers, but into her own suite connected to his, a space that was entirely hers to decorate and fill with books and flowers and all the ordinary things that made it feel like home. The court had settled into an uneasy acceptance. There were still factions that disapproved, still whispers about the human consort, but no one challenged openly. Quillon ruled with the same cold efficiency he always had, but now he smiled more often, laughed occasionally, let himself be seen as something more than just a throne and crown. And every Saturday, without fail, they went to the flower market. It became tradition. Quillon would leave all the politics and power behind, dress in ordinary clothes, and walk through the stalls with Penelope like they were just two people in love. She'd buy whatever looked prettiest, and he'd carry her purchases, and they'd remember how it all started. "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked one Saturday. They were sharing a bench, watching vendors pack up for the day, tulips and daisies piled in Quillon's lap. "Regret what?" "All of this. Bringing me into your life, dealing with the court's disapproval, fighting Seraphine." Quillon turned to look at her, his strange silver eyes soft. "Never, not for a single moment." "Even when it's complicated?" "Especially then. Before you, my life was simple, cold, empty. Now it's complicated and warm and full, and I wouldn't trade that for anything." Penelope leaned against him. "I love you. I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anything." They sat together as the market closed around them, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A storm was building on the horizon, clouds gathering in the distance. "Looks like rain," Penelope observed. "Do you have your umbrella?" "Always." Quillon smiled. "Good." I'm still not used to cold, but I've gotten very used to sharing your umbrella. You can share it anytime. Forever? Penelope looked up at him, this 700-year-old vampire king who'd forgotten what warmth felt like until she'd offered him shelter from a storm. Forever sounds perfect. The rain started as they walked home, and Penelope opened her umbrella, holding it to cover them both. Quillon moved closer, deliberately sharing the small dry space, and Penelope felt his hand find hers. They walked through the rain together, king and human, immortal and mortal, bound by something stronger than politics or power or time. And for the first time in 700 years, Quillon felt completely, perfectly warm. The years that followed were a careful balance of two worlds. Penelope kept her job at the library, refusing to give up the work she loved even as she took on informal duties at court. She became something unexpected in vampire politics, a bridge between human and immortal concerns, someone who could translate the needs of one world to the other. Quillon's rule strengthened. The court learned that their king's bond didn't weaken him, it gave him perspective they lacked. He made better decisions, showed more wisdom, and ruled with a combination of strength and compassion that made their territory thrive in ways it hadn't before. There were still challenges, but they were different now. Political maneuvering rather than direct combat. Quillon handled them with the same cold efficiency, but now he had someone to come home to afterward, someone who reminded him why the work mattered. On their third anniversary, Quillon took Penelope back to the flower market. It was Saturday morning, clear and bright, and they browsed the stalls hand in hand. "I have something for you," Quillon said. Penelope turned to find him holding a small box. Her heart stuttered. "Quillon, I know what you're going to say, that marriage is a human institution, that I'm immortal and you're not, that there are complications." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took her breath away. Simple, elegant, with a stone that caught the light like captured starlight. "But I've spent 3 years loving you, and I want to spend whatever time we have making that official. Will you marry me?" Penelope's vision blurred. "You want to marry me?" "I want to bind myself to you in every way possible. Human traditions, vampire bonds, anything and everything that says you're mine and I'm yours." "What about the court?" "They'll adjust. They always do. Besides, I'm the king. I can make whatever decisions I want about my own life." Penelope laughed through tears. "That's absolutely true." "So is that a yes?" "Yes. Obviously yes. I love you, you ridiculous vampire king." Quillon slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her there in the middle of the flower market while vendors applauded and Mrs. Chen shouted congratulations from her rose stall. They married 3 months later in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. The court attended, dressed in their finest, and watched their king pledge himself to a human woman with vows that promised forever in ways that transcended immortality. Penelope wore white, Quillon wore formal black, and when they kissed to seal their bond, the assembled crowd, vampire and human alike, cheered. The reception was held at the mansion, a massive celebration that lasted well into the night. Penelope danced with Quillon, with Dorian, with vampires who challenged their bond years ago and now offered genuine congratulations. "Happy?" Quillon asked as they swayed together. "Impossibly happy. You?" "More than I thought possible. You've given me 700 years of warmth compressed into 3 years of knowing you." Penelope smiled against his shoulder. "We're just getting started." "I know. That's the best part." Years passed. Penelope's hair began to show gray at the temples. Quillon remained unchanged, eternally pale and beautiful, and they navigated the reality of mortal and immortal together. "I've been thinking," Penelope said one evening. They were in their private chambers, Quillon reading while she worked on library programs. "About?" "The future, my future specifically." Quillon set down his book, giving her his full attention. "What about it?" "I'm aging. You're not. Eventually that gap is going to become obvious." "I know. Does it bother you?" "Your mortality? Every single day, but I wouldn't change it. You're human. That's part of who you are, and I love all of who you are." Penelope took a breath. "What if I asked you to change me?" Quillon went absolutely still. "Into a vampire?" "Yes." "Penelope, hear me out. I know it's a huge decision. I know there are complications, but I've thought about it, really thought about it, and I want more time with you. Not just decades, centuries. I want to see where this goes without a timer counting down." Quillon crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. Becoming a vampire isn't like extending your life. It changes everything. The way you experience the world, your needs, your nature. I won't lie and say it's painless or easy. I know, but I also know I want it, if you're willing. If I'm willing? Quillon's laugh was shaky. I've wanted to ask you for years, but I was afraid you'd say yes for the wrong reasons. To please me rather than because it's what you truly wanted. It's what I want. Not because I'm afraid of dying, but because I want to spend forever with you, and forever requires a little immortality. Quillon pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. It's permanent. Once done, it can't be undone. I know. You'll have to feed, learn to control new instincts, deal with vampire politics as one of us rather than as an outsider. I know all of that, and I still want it. Then yes, God, yes, I'll change you. Give you eternity beside me, but we do it carefully, safely, with preparation. How long? A month. To make sure you're certain, to prepare your body, to say goodbye to the parts of human life you'll be leaving behind. Penelope nodded. A month, I can do that. They spent that month in careful preparation. Penelope settled her human affairs, told her family she was moving abroad for work, and said goodbye to the library that had been her home for so long. Quillon arranged for medical supervision, bringing in vampires who specialized in the turning process to ensure it went smoothly. The night they chose was quiet. No ceremony, no witnesses except Dorian. Just Penelope and Quillon in their chambers, the weight of what they were about to do settling over them like a blanket. Last chance to change your mind, Quillon said. Penelope took his hand. I'm not changing my mind. Turn me. Make me yours in every possible way. The process was excruciating. Quillon's bite, his venom entering her bloodstream, the way her body began to shut down and rebuild itself. Penelope screamed through the worst of it, and Quillon held her, murmuring comfort in languages she didn't recognize. His own face twisted with shared pain. It took 3 days. 3 days of dying and being reborn, of her human self burning away and something new emerging. When Penelope finally opened her eyes, the world looked different. Everything was sharper, colors more vivid. She could hear Quillon's unnecessary breathing, Dorian's footsteps 3 rooms away, her own body's strange new silence. Penelope? She turned to find Quillon beside her, his expression equal parts hope and terror. Hi, she whispered. Her voice sounded different, clearer. How do you feel? Strange, new, like myself, but more. Penelope sat up, testing her body's new capabilities. It worked. It did. You're a vampire now, fully. Penelope looked at her hands. They were paler than before, her skin taking on that luminous quality she'd always admired in Quillon. When she touched his face, she felt the coolness of his skin match her own temperature. We're the same now, she said. Yes, in every way that matters. How long will it take to adjust? Years, decades maybe, but I'll be with you through all of it. Teaching you, protecting you while you learn control. Penelope kissed him, tasting the difference in her own senses. Everything was heightened, intense, overwhelming in the best way. I love you, she said. I love you too, for however many centuries we have together. Penelope adjusted to her new existence with the same determined grace she'd brought to everything else. She learned to feed without killing, to control the new instincts that came with immortality, to navigate vampire politics from the inside rather than as an observer. The court's reaction was mixed. Some welcomed her transformation as proof of her commitment. Others saw it as confirmation that Quillon was too far gone to rule effectively. But Quillon shut down challenges with the same cold efficiency he always had, and gradually acceptance settled in. Penelope and Quillon ruled together, not as king and consort, but as partners. She brought perspective from her human years, understanding of mortal concerns that most vampires had forgotten. He brought centuries of wisdom and the kind of power that kept their territory stable. It worked. They made it work. 50 years after Penelope's transformation, they returned to the flower market on a Saturday morning. It had changed over the decades, new vendors, different flowers, modern touches, but the essential character remained. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter ran the rose stall now. She didn't recognize them, but she smiled and offered them the same kind of white roses that had started everything. For you and your partner, she said. Penelope took them, exchanging a glance with Quillon. His expression was soft, nostalgic, full of everything they had built together. "Thank you," Penelope said. They walked through the market, hand in hand, two pale, beautiful vampires that drew curious glances but no real alarm. The city had grown more accepting of their kind over the decades. Mixed couples were common now. "Do you ever miss it?" Quillon asked. "Being human?" Penelope considered this. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the way life felt urgent because it was short, but I don't regret choosing this, choosing forever with you. Even with the complications? Especially with the complications. We've built something beautiful, Quillon. A life that works. A rule that's strong and compassionate. A bond that survived challenges neither of us expected." "We have," Quillon agreed, "and we'll keep building it for centuries more." They stopped at the bench where he'd proposed, sitting together while the market bustled around them. The white roses rested in Penelope's lap, and she leaned against Quillon's shoulder, feeling perfectly content. "Thank you," Quillon said quietly. "For what?" "For offering me your umbrella that day, for seeing me as someone worth knowing, for teaching me that 700 years of isolation was a choice, not a necessity." Penelope smiled. "Thank you for accepting the umbrella, for letting me in, for proving that cold men can learn to be warm again." "I wasn't cold, I was frozen. There's a difference. And now," Quillon kissed the top of her head, "now I'm exactly the right temperature, because I have you." They sat together as the morning stretched into afternoon, two immortals watching the mortal world spin on around them. The market closed, vendors packed up, clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain. "Think it'll storm?" Penelope asked. "Probably. Do you have your umbrella?" She laughed. "Always." "Good. Though I have to admit, I miss the rain sometimes. The way it felt before I forgot to notice it. We could stand in it anyway, for old time's sake." "I'd like that." The rain started as they walked home, and Penelope opened her umbrella out of habit, holding it to cover them both. Quillon moved close, sharing the small dry space, and they walked through the storm together just like they had a lifetime ago. Except now, they were both immortal, both vampire, both equally capable of standing in the rain without noticing the cold. But they chose to share the umbrella anyway. Because that's what love was, Penelope thought, choosing closeness even when you didn't need it, protecting each other even when you were both strong enough to stand alone, finding warmth in small gestures that mattered because of what they represented. "I love you," Penelope said. "I love you too, for now and always." They walked through the rain toward home, king and queen, partners in every sense of the word. The umbrella kept them dry, and their bond kept them warm, and the century stretched ahead full of promise and possibility. Behind them, the flower market faded into the storm. Ahead, their life together continued beautiful and complicated and worth every moment, exactly as it should be.